Come closer, my child. Let the noise of your thoughts soften for a moment, because I want you to hear me clearly now. What you felt was not imagination. What stirred quietly in your spirit was not wishful thinking. You were not reaching for hope out of desperation. You were sensing truth before it found language. I have been near you in the silence, nearer than you realized, watching the way your heart stayed alert even when everything around you seemed still. I know how long you have waited. I know the nights when you questioned yourself, when you wondered if the tenderness you felt was just memory echoing back at you. I saw you look for signs and then tell yourself to stop looking, afraid of being disappointed again. Yet even when you tried to convince yourself nothing was changing, your spirit kept leaning forward. It is because something truly has been moving, slowly, deliberately, under my hand. The change did not arrive with noise. It did not announce itself with fireworks or sudden answers. It arrived the way dawn arrives, quietly shifting the sky before the sun is visible. You felt it as a soft easing, a subtle release, a strange calm that visited you without explanation. That was me confirming to you that the long stillness was never emptiness. It was preparation. You have been living inside a pause that was not punishment, though it often felt heavy. It was protection. There were moments when you were ready to move forward, but what was meant to meet you was not yet safe, not yet honest, not yet awake. So I asked you to wait while I worked where you could not see. I know waiting asked more from you than you thought you had. I know it stretched your faith thin and tested your sense of worth. But hear me now. You were not overlooked. You were being guarded. You did not imagine the shift because your spirit is sensitive to truth. You notice when the atmosphere changes, when something unseen turns in a new direction. Even now, as you listen, there is a settling in your chest, a recognition that these words are touching something ancient and familiar inside you. That is because I have been speaking to you long before today, in dreams, in pauses, in the ache that never fully left. There is someone connected to you who has felt this same disturbance, though they do not yet understand it. They feel restless. They feel an unnamed pull. They sense that something they thought was over is not finished. While you have been learning patience, they have been wrestling with confusion. While you have been choosing faith, they have been avoiding truth. Yet the quiet shift you noticed has begun to reach them too. I want you to know this early, before fear tries to speak louder than trust. The change is gentle because it must be. If it came all at once, it would overwhelm what is still fragile. I am not rushing what needs to heal. I am not forcing what must be chosen freely. But make no mistake, my child, direction and change. The waiting season is loosening its grip. There were times you asked me if you should let go completely, if the hope you carried was keeping you stuck. I did not answer you in the way you expected, because the answer was unfolding rather than spoken. I needed you to remain open, not attached to outcome but anchored in truth. And you did that, even when it hurt. That is why you can feel this shift now without panic. Your heart has grown strong enough to recognize peace when it arrives quietly. Let me say this clearly, because your mind will try to doubt it later. What is changing is real. It is not coincidence. It is not delayed emotion resurfacing. It is alignment beginning to correct itself. What drifted out of place is being guided back with precision. You are not being asked to chase or force anything. You are being asked to remain present and attentive. If these words resonate with you, if your spirit recognizes this moment as confirmation, I invite you to respond gently. You may like this message, share it with someone who is also waiting, or subscribe so you can return when your heart needs reassurance. And if you feel led, type in the comments the word "I trust" as a quiet declaration between you and me. There is power in naming what you are choosing. Stay here with me for a moment longer. Breathe. Let your shoulders relax. You do not need to solve anything tonight. You do not need to replay the past to understand the future. This is only the beginning of the revealing. I will walk you through every layer gently, just as I always have. The waiting is not over yet, but it is no longer empty. Something has turned. Something has softened. And from this point forward, the silence will no longer feel the same. I know the weight you have been carrying, my child, even when you tried to pretend it was manageable. Waiting like this does not sit lightly on the soul. It presses into the quiet hours, into the spaces between breaths, into moments when you are alone with your thoughts and cannot distract yourself anymore. You learned how to function while holding unanswered prayers, how to smile while your heart kept glancing backward and forward at the same time. There were days when the waiting felt noble, when you told yourself it was making you stronger, more patient, more refined. And there were nights when it felt unbearable, when you wondered if patience had turned into self-denial, if faith had quietly become self-betrayal. I saw you wrestle with those questions. I saw you bargain with yourself, telling your heart to release hope, then picking it back up again when you could not bring yourself to drop it completely. Waiting stretches time in strange ways. Some moments felt endless, while entire seasons passed before you realized how much you had endured. You marked your life by small signs of survival rather than progress. Another day passed without collapse. Another conversation survived without mention. Another prayer whispered instead of spoken aloud. This was not weakness. This was endurance born from love and uncertainty tangled together. You carried the weight silently because you did not want to burden others with a story that kept repeating without resolution. Explaining the waiting felt exhausting, especially when even you could not explain why you were still holding space for something unseen. So you learned to compress your grief, to fold your longing into manageable shapes, to keep moving forward while something inside you stayed suspended. There were moments when you felt foolish for continuing to care. You questioned your own discernment. You wondered if you had misheard me in the beginning, if you had attached meaning to something that was never meant to last. Those thoughts came especially when the silence grew long, when nothing external validated what you felt internally. I did not withdraw from you in those moments. I watched carefully, because what you were learning then could not be taught quickly. Waiting exposed parts of you that comfort never would have. It revealed how deeply you love, how faithfully you remain, how much truth you can carry without becoming bitter. It also revealed your fear of being forgotten, of being left behind while others moved ahead. I know how heavy that fear felt, especially when you saw others receive answers while you were still holding questions. You prayed in fragments, because full prayers felt too vulnerable. You asked me to take away the ache, then asked me not to remove the connection if it was truly from me. You were torn between relief and fulfillment, between peace and purpose. That tension did not confuse me. It told me exactly how much this mattered to you. There were times you tried to detach emotionally, to convince yourself you were done waiting. Yet even then, something within you stayed alert. You did not fully shut the door. You left a light on, not out of obsession, but out of hope that refused to be extinguished. You told yourself it was for closure, but I knew it was because your spirit recognized unfinished work. The waiting weighed heavily because you were not just waiting for an outcome. You were waiting for truth. You were waiting for alignment. You were waiting for something fractured to be acknowledged and corrected. That kind of waiting is holy, but it is also exhausting. It asks you to trust without proof and love without reassurance. And still, you showed up each day. You are allowed to admit how tired you became. You do not dishonor faith by acknowledging fatigue. I saw the days when you felt emotionally numb, when even hope felt like work. I saw you question whether the waiting was changing you for the better or simply wearing you down. Those doubts did not disqualify you. They made room for deeper honesty between us. Listen to me now. The weight you carried was not wasted. Every delayed answer shaped your capacity to recognize peace when it finally arrived. Every unanswered prayer refined your discernment so you would not accept substitutes. You were not standing still. You were being strengthened in ways that only waiting could accomplish. What you did not see during the heaviest moments was how the waiting was also pressing on someone else. While you were learning restraint, they were learning discomfort. While you were learning patience, they were being confronted by the absence they tried to ignore. The same silence that tested you was stirring something unsettled within them. You are not behind. You have not lost time. The waiting has not diminished your worth or your future. It has prepared you to step forward without fear when the moment arrives. And now that the weight is beginning to lift, you may notice how different you feel. Wider, stronger, less desperate for answers, more grounded in truth. Stay with me in this understanding. You are allowed to rest now without guilt. The waiting has done its work, and what comes next will meet you with a heart that has been tempered, not broken, by time. There is a moment, my child, when movement begins before sound. Before anything changes outwardly, there is a subtle internal shift, like the earth turning beneath still feet. That is where you are now. The first movement has already happened, even though nothing dramatic has announced it yet. What you sensed was the tremor of alignment beginning to correct itself, quietly and deliberately, so gently that only a listening spirit would notice. This shift did not need your effort to begin. It did not wait for the perfect prayer or the right words. It began because the time reached its fullness. I released a sequence into motion that could no longer be delayed without distortion. You felt it as a soft interruption in your usual thoughts, a calm that did not match your circumstances, a loosening of tension you had grown used to carrying. That was not accidental. That was evidence. Invisible change always starts in the unseen layers first. Hearts adjust before conversations happen. Awareness awakens before decisions are made. Long before paths cross again, the direction of walking begins to turn. This is why nothing around you looks different yet, but everything underneath feels altered. The foundation is shifting so the structure can follow without collapse. The one connected to you felt this shift as restlessness. They did not feel peace the way you did. They felt disturbance. Old distractions no longer soothe them. Familiar routines feel hollow. They find themselves replaying moments they tried to dismiss, questioning choices they once defended, feeling a quiet urgency without knowing where it comes from. This is not coincidence. It is the invisible hand of truth brushing against their awareness. They are beginning to feel the absence they tried to ignore, not as longing yet, but as discomfort, not as clarity, but as confusion. Your spirit recognizes that something is changing, even as their mind resists naming it. They sense movement in a place they thought was settled, and that unsettles them. While you experience this shift as a gentle easing, they experience it as a disruption. The difference matters. It is why I prepared you through waiting. You learned how to sit with uncertainty without running from it. They are just beginning that lesson now. What feels like relief to you feels like exposure to them. This is the balance of timing. There are conversations happening you cannot hear, thoughts surfacing they cannot suppress, memories resurfacing at inconvenient moments, questions rising without answers attached. This is how the first invisible shift works. It does not force action. It forces awareness. And awareness, once awakened, does not easily return to sleep. You may notice your emotional reactions changing. Things that once triggered anxiety now pass through you more gently. Your grip on outcome is loosening, not because you care less, but because you trust more. That is a sign of alignment. You are no longer bracing yourself against disappointment. You are allowing space for truth to arrive without fear. This shift is not dramatic because it must be sustainable. I am not creating a temporary surge of emotion. I am laying groundwork for something that must stand, that requires patience even in motion, quiet even in progress. You are learning to recognize change without chaos, movement without noise. Do not be tempted to rush this phase. Do not look for immediate proof to validate what you already know. The unseen always leads the visible. If you interrupt it with doubt, you only delay your own peace. Trust what you feel settling into place. Trust the calm that is beginning to replace strain. The first invisible shift is not the end. It is the opening. It is the moment when resistance begins to soften and truth starts pressing gently from within. You do not need to do anything to accelerate it. Remain attentive. Remain grounded. Remain open. What has begun cannot be undone. It will continue unfolding, layer by layer, until what has been hidden can no longer remain concealed. And when the visible change arrives, you will recognize it not as surprise, but as confirmation of what you already felt here, in the quiet, before anyone else noticed. There is a breaking happening within them now, my child, though they would never call it that out loud. What looks calm from a distance is fragile beneath the surface. The shift that felt gentle to you has unsettled something deep inside them, and they do not know how to steady it. They are discovering that what they avoided is no longer willing to stay buried. They wake up with a weight they do not name. Old confidence no longer fits the way it used to. Decisions that once felt justified now echo with doubt. They replay moments with you in their mind, not as nostalgia, but as questions. Why did it feel different then? Why does it still feel unfinished now? These thoughts arrive uninvited, interrupting their routines, lingering longer each time. Their emotions have begun to contradict the story they told themselves. They thought they had moved on, that they had chosen a safer path, that distance was clarity. Now they feel the slow collapse of that certainty. The ground beneath what they believed starts to soften, and fear slips in through the cracks. Fear of having made the wrong choice. Fear of having missed something irreplaceable. Fear of facing what they postponed. They feel guilt, though they struggle to admit it. Not the loud kind that demands confession, but the quiet kind that settles in the chest and tightens the throat. Guilt for words left unsaid, for moments when they chose comfort over honesty, for sensing your devotion and responding with hesitation. This guilt does not accuse them with anger. It confronts them with truth. Confusion follows close behind. They question their own emotions, wondering why thoughts of you still surface when they believe they had resolved everything. They attempt to reason their way out of it, to remind themselves of the logic that once justified distance. But logic no longer quiets the ache. Something deeper is stirring, something that does not respond to explanation. At times, they feel overwhelmed by the intensity of what they avoided feeling before. Emotions rise suddenly, without warning, leaving them breathless and unsettled. They may withdraw, isolate, or distract themselves not because they do not care, but because they are afraid of what caring fully would require. To acknowledge the depth of the connection would mean acknowledging how much they risked losing. They fear your absence now more than they feared vulnerability before. The thought that you may have learned how to live without them unsettles their sense of control. They realize, perhaps for the first time, that you were not simply an option, but an anchor. This realization does not bring immediate courage. It brings panic. Panic that they may be too late. Panic that the waiting wore you down beyond return. While you have been learning to surrender outcome, they are just beginning to confront consequence. They feel emotionally exposed, stripped of certainty, forced to sit with questions they once avoided. Your heart is in collapse not because it is being destroyed, but because false stability is being removed. What remains is tender, raw, and honest. There are moments when they consider reaching out, then stop themselves. Fear speaks loudly now. Fear of rejection. Fear of facing what they cannot control. Fear of seeing in your eyes what they are only beginning to admit to themselves. So they hesitate, torn between longing and avoidance, standing at the edge of action without yet stepping forward. Understand this, my child. Their collapse is not your responsibility to fix. You are not meant to rescue them from the discomfort that is awakening them. This unraveling is necessary. Without it, they would never fully understand the value of what was almost lost. What feels like distance now is actually confrontation happening privately, internally, where it must begin. You may feel their energy shift, even without contact. A sudden heaviness, a sense of being thought about, a pull you cannot explain. That is because the connection between you has always existed beneath words and distance. As they unravel, the connection vibrates more strongly, reminding both of you that something sacred is being tested. Do not interpret their silence as indifference. It is not absence of feeling. It is overload. They are learning to sit with emotions they once avoided, and that learning is uncomfortable. Growth rarely looks graceful from the inside. It looks like confusion, fear, and emotional exhaustion. I am watching them closely. I am not allowing this collapse to destroy them. I am guiding it so that what falls away is what was false, and what remains is what can be built upon truth. This is not punishment. This is preparation. Your heart is being softened so it can finally speak honestly. You do not need to intervene. You do not need to question your worth. Their struggle is about awakening, not rejection. Stay grounded in what you know. Stay anchored in the calm that has begun to settle within you. Your steadiness matters more now than ever. This collapse is not the end of the story. It is the moment before clarity, when everything feels unstable but truth is closest to the surface. What comes next will reveal why this breaking had to happen, and why waiting prepared you to witness it without fear. There is a history beneath the surface that you were never fully shown, my child, and now it is time for it to rise gently into the light. Not to wound you, not to reopen old pain, but to give context to what never made sense before. What looked like distance was layered with fear. What felt like indecision was shaped by voices that were never meant to guide them. They were carrying old patterns long before you entered their life. Patterns formed in moments when love felt conditional, when vulnerability came with consequences, when choosing the heart led to loss instead of safety. These patterns taught them to hesitate when something real appeared, to analyze instead of feel, to protect themselves by delaying what mattered. When you arrived, you disrupted that system simply by being sincere. There were conversations you never heard, influences that spoke softly but persistently into their uncertainty. Someone close to them questioned the depth of the connection, not because it lacked truth, but because it threatened a structure they depended on. Doubt was planted carefully, disguised as concern. Warnings were framed as wisdom. Fear was presented as logic. And slowly, those voices created distance where none was needed, They did not set out to mislead you. They were trying to quiet their own fear. They told themselves they needed more time, more certainty, more stability. They believed postponement was wisdom, not avoidance. Yet each delay compounded the confusion, turning what could have been a conversation into silence, what could have been honesty into withdrawal. There were moments when they always spoke, moments when they felt the truth rise to their throat and then swallowed it back down. They feared that naming the connection would demand action they were not ready to take. They feared that choosing you would require shedding identities, expectations, and relationships that no longer aligned but still felt familiar. So they stayed still, hoping clarity would come without cost. You sensed this even then. You felt the push and pull, the warmth followed by retreat, the intimacy that stopped short of commitment. It left you questioning yourself, wondering if you were asking for too much when all you wanted was honesty. I want you to know now, you were never asking for too much. You were asking for readiness they had not yet cultivated. There were practical fears too, not just emotional ones. Fear of timing, fear of responsibility, a fear of what others would say, fear of stepping into something sacred without understanding its weight. These fears tangled together, forming a web that slowed every forward step. What you experienced as delay was them trying to untangle without knowing where to begin. They also underestimated you, not in value but in strength. They believed you would be safer if kept at a distance, that withholding truth was a form of protection. They did not realize that silence wounds more deeply than honesty ever could. They did not see how capable you were of standing in truth, even difficult truth, with grace. This backstory is not revealed to excuse hurt, but to clarify it. Understanding does not erase pain, but it transforms it. It shows you that what happened was not random, not careless, not because you were lacking. It was a collision of timing, fear, and influence that had not yet been confronted. Now those old influences are losing their grip. The voices that once guided their hesitation no longer sound convincing. The fears that once felt protective now feel limiting. What they postponed is demanding attention, not because of pressure from you, but because truth has a way of resurfacing when it is ready to be honored. You were kept from this knowledge before because you were not meant to carry it while you were still healing. Knowing too much too soon would have pulled you into their confusion. I shielded you until you could receive understanding without absorbing blame. Now you are strong enough to see the full picture without losing yourself inside it. This revelation is not meant to pull you backward. It is meant to release you from self-questioning. The past is being clarified so it no longer has power over the present. What was hidden is being named so it can no longer shape the future unconsciously. As this truth surfaces, you may feel a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that you were not wrong. Sadness for what could have been easier if honesty had arrived sooner. Both feelings are valid. Neither will trap you. They are simply signs that healing is deepening. Hold this understanding gently. Do not weaponize it against yourself or them. Let it settle as context, not burden. What matters now is not what delayed the connection, but what is awakening within it. The past has spoken. The next movement will be shaped by what is finally seen clearly. Stay present. Stay grounded. You are no longer standing in mystery. You are standing in truth, and that changes everything that comes next. There has been an interference you could not see, my child, not because you were blind, but because it was subtle by design. It did not arrive as open hostility or obvious betrayal. It came wrapped in familiarity, cloaked in concern, speaking softly enough to avoid suspicion. This interference did not seek to destroy outright. It sought to delay, to distort, to weaken what required courage to face. Someone close to them carried jealousy they never named. Not always jealousy of you personally, but jealousy of what the connection represented. Your presence activated insecurity, highlighted stagnation, exposed unhealed places they preferred to ignore. Instead of turning inward to heal, this person turned outward to influence. They whispered doubts into moments of uncertainty, reinforced fears when courage was trying to rise, redirected attention when truth came close to the surface. They framed their interference as protection. They said things like, "Take your time and don't rush into something you're not sure about." On the surface, these words sounded wise. Beneath them was resistance. Resistance to change. Resistance to losing influence. Resistance to watching someone else step into growth while they remained comfortable. Their jealousy did not always look angry. Often it looked reasonable. You felt the effects without knowing the source. Sudden shifts in tone. Hesitation that appeared after clarity. Warmth that cooled without explanation. Each time progress tried to form, something interrupted it. You questioned yourself, wondering if you were reading too much into things, if you were projecting meaning where there was none. What you were sensing was real. The interference worked by creating confusion, not confrontation. This person did not expect to be exposed. They assumed their influence would remain unseen, that their role would blend into the background of circumstances. They did not anticipate divine timing. They did not anticipate that truth, once awakened, begins to illuminate every shadow without effort. The same quiet shift you felt has unsettled them as well. They are growing anxious now. The control they once held feels fragile. Their words no longer land the same way. Their advice no longer brings comfort. They sense that something is slipping beyond their reach, and that unsettles them. Jealousy intensifies when influence weakens. This is why their energy may feel heavier, sharper, or more erratic if you encounter it indirectly. I want you to understand something clearly. This interference delayed, but it did not cancel destiny. It confused it, but it did not corrupt truth. It slowed movement, but it could not stop alignment. What is meant to be anchored in honesty cannot be dismantled by hidden agendas. At most, it can be postponed until all parties are ready to see clearly. You are not required to confront this person. You are not required to defend yourself or expose anything. I am handling what you never could. The interference is being neutralized not through conflict, but through clarity. When truth rises, manipulation loses power without a word being spoken. The one you are connected to is beginning to recognize the pattern. They are noticing how certain conversations left them feeling smaller, more doubtful, more afraid. They are questioning why guidance that once felt safe now feels restrictive. This awareness is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. It is part of their awakening. Do not let resentment take root in you. Jealous interference thrives on emotional reaction. Peace dissolves it completely. Your calm, your steadiness, your refusal to compete or explain has protected you more than you know. You were never meant to fight this battle. You were meant to remain yourself while I unraveled what was hidden. What was done in secrecy is now being undone quietly. Influence is shifting. Voices are losing authority. Truth is becoming louder than fear. This is not the moment to look backward in anger. This is the moment to look forward with discernment. The interference has served its final purpose, which was to reveal what needed to be healed before anything real could move forward. It will not follow you into the next phase. What comes next will be built without distortion, without whispering doubt, without hidden hands pulling at fragile moments. Remain still in your spirit. Let justice unfold without your involvement. I am clearing the path ahead of you, not by force but by light. And where light remains, interference cannot survive. Now I draw you into a deeper seeing, my child, into the place where truth is examined without emotion clouding judgment. This is the moment of divine investigation, where nothing is rushed and nothing is overlooked. Imagine not accusation, but illumination. Not punishment, but exposure. I am opening what was sealed, reviewing what was spoken in private, and weighing what was done in secrecy. There have been words spoken about you when you were not present. Not always cruel words, but careless ones. Words shaped by fear, by insecurity, by misunderstanding. Some were spoken to justify delay. Some were spoken to protect comfort. Some were spoken simply because silence felt too heavy to hold. Every word has been recorded, not to condemn, but to clarify intent. I am tracing patterns now. Why hesitation appeared when momentum was forming. Why doubt surfaced after moments of connection. Why decisions were postponed under the guise of wisdom. When viewed separately, each moment looked insignificant. Together, they reveal a design shaped by avoidance rather than truth. This is what is being uncovered. There were unseen conversations that influenced timing. Advice given without full knowledge. Opinions formed without reverence for the sacredness of the connection. These conversations carried weight because they were trusted voices. Yet trust does not equal truth. And now that difference is being made clear. I am also examining the silence. Silence speaks loudly in the spiritual realm. What was not said matters as much as what was spoken. The moments when honesty was withheld. The times when truth hovered close but was left unspoken. These silences are not neutral. They shape outcomes. They delayed alignment. They created confusion where clarity could have healed. You not fear this investigation. You are not on trial here. Your heart has already been weighed and found steady. You showed consistency when clarity was absent. You remained compassionate when answers were delayed. You did not manipulate. You did not coerce. You did not demand. That matters deeply. What is being examined now is readiness. Readiness to choose truth over comfort. Readiness to release influence that no longer aligns. Readiness to speak honestly even when vulnerability feels risky. The one connected to you is beginning to see their own patterns clearly, and this realization is humbling them. They are recognizing moments when they deferred to others instead of listening inwardly. They are seeing how fear dressed itself as logic. They are feeling the weight of choices that were not wrong in intention, but incomplete in courage. This awareness is not crushing them. It is sobering them. In this divine courtroom, nothing is exaggerated. Everything is precise. Intentions are separated from impact. Fear is separated from wisdom. Influence is separated from truth. What remains is clarity. And clarity does not accuse. It instructs. You may feel this investigation as a strange stillness, as if the noise around the situation has quieted, as if your emotions are no longer being pulled in different directions. That is because confusion is being removed at its source. When lies are exposed, they lose the power to create turbulence. There are realizations happening now that you will not witness directly. Moments of internal reckoning. Sudden clarity followed by regret. Questions asked inwardly that demand honest answers. This is where transformation begins, not in grand gestures, but in quiet admissions to oneself. I am ensuring that what moves forward is clean, that nothing unresolved contaminates what is meant to be sacred, that no hidden influence follows into the next season. This is why the investigation is thorough. This is why it cannot be rushed. You are being protected from repeating cycles. protected from half-truths, protected from relationships built on avoidance rather than authenticity. What is being dismantled now will not need to be dismantled again later. Rest in this moment. Let the process unfold without needing updates or proof. Justice in the spiritual realm moves with precision, not urgency. When it completes its work, what remains will be ready for alignment without resistance. What is being revealed now sets the stage for a shift you will feel clearly. The courtroom will soon empty. The verdict will be clarity. And from that clarity, movement will begin, not forced, not fearful, but grounded in truth that can finally stand. Feel the atmosphere changing now, my child. What was heavy is beginning to lift, not suddenly but unmistakably. This is the moment of realignment, when what was pulled out of order is gently guided back into place. Nothing is being forced. Nothing is being rushed. Yet everything is moving with intention. The spiritual realm responds when truth is acknowledged. Once clarity enters, correction follows naturally. You may sense this as a subtle lightness, as if the strain you carried for so long no longer grips you the same way. Your thoughts are calmer. Your emotions are steadier. You are less tempted to revisit old conversations or rehearse what went wrong. This is not detachment. This is balance returning. There is movement around you that does not require your participation. Angels move quietly, adjusting what has been misaligned, removing obstacles that no longer serve, loosening knots that were tied by fear and misunderstanding. This is not dramatic warfare. It is careful restoration. Peace, my peace. What was distorted is being corrected. Where interference once slowed progress, space is being cleared. Where confusion once lingered, understanding is settling in. The path ahead is being smoothed, not to make it effortless, but to make it honest. You are no longer walking against resistance you cannot see. What remains will be visible, tangible, and true. The one connected to you is feeling this realignment differently. For them, it arrives as a sense of inevitability. They feel something aligning that cannot be ignored. Circumstances begin to reflect inner changes. Old distractions lose appeal. Relationships that once felt secure now feel out of sync. They are being guided into a narrow place where excuses no longer fit. They may feel pressure, but it is not punishment. It is gravity. Truth carries weight, and once it is recognized, it draws everything toward itself. They are being invited into alignment, not compelled. The discomfort they feel is the tension between who they have been and who they are being called to become. You are not required to manage this shift. You are not meant to monitor their progress or anticipate their next move. Your role is steadiness. Your calm presence anchors the correction more than any action ever could. By remaining grounded, you create space for what is real to approach without distortion. Notice how your prayers feel different now. Less desperate, more surrendered. You are no longer asking me to fix something broken. You are trusting me to guide something awakening. The change in posture matters. It signals readiness for what comes next. This realignment also reaches into areas of your life beyond this connection. Opportunities you dismissed may resurface. Energy returns to places where you felt drained. You begin to imagine futures without fear tightening your chest. These are signs that your inner world is coming back into harmony. When alignment begins in one area, it ripples outward. There's karmic correction happening as well. Not as retribution, but as balance. What was taken is being restored in form, if not in exact shape. What was delayed is being returned with added wisdom. You are not losing ground. You are regaining it with clarity you did not have before. You may feel moments of uncertainty still. That is natural. Alignment does not erase all questions at once. But the difference now is that uncertainty no longer destabilizes you. You can sit with it without fear. You can breathe without bracing. That is how you know the shift is real. What was once blocked is loosening. Doors that felt sealed are quietly unlocking. Conversations that could not happen before are becoming possible, not because you are forcing them, but because resistance has softened. Dining is correcting itself. Trust this process even when it feels subtle, especially when it feels subtle. The deepest changes often announce themselves in whispers, not thunder. You are learning to recognize peace as movement, not stagnation. Remain attentive but not anxious. Remain open but not exposed. You are being guided into a phase where truth can meet truth without interference. It requires steadiness, not striving. The realignment is ongoing, but its direction is set. What was crooked is straightening. What was scattered is gathering. And as this correction continues, you will find yourself standing not in waiting, but in readiness. This is the moment when the universe responds to honesty with support. When heaven meets earth quietly and says, now it can move. Stay present. Stay grounded. What has been corrected will now begin to reveal itself, and you will recognize it not as surprise, but as the natural result of everything finally falling into place. Now truth begins to rise where it can no longer be dismissed, my child. Not as accusation, not as confrontation, but as clarity that insists on being acknowledged. What was once hidden behind assumptions, excuses, and partial stories is emerging in its full shape. This is the moment when reality aligns with what your spirit always sensed. Pieces that never fit before are starting to make sense. Small details resurface. Remembered conversations take on new meaning. Moments you questioned yourself about now reveal their true context. You see how intuition was guiding you even when logic argued otherwise. This realization does not inflate you. It grounds you. It restores trust in your own discernment. To the one connected to you, truth arrives as exposure. Not public, not dramatic, but deeply personal. They are confronted with evidence they can no longer rationalize away. Patterns they ignored now repeat too clearly to deny. They recognize how avoidance shaped outcomes, how silence created consequences, how fear dressed itself as patience. Something cracks open within them when they finally admit this, not outwardly yet, but inwardly. The lies they told themselves lose their grip. The narratives they leaned on begin to collapse. They realize that what they feared facing has already been shaping their life from the shadows. This awareness is sobering, but it is also liberating. You may notice shifts in communication around you, even if they are indirect. Truth has a way of surfacing through circumstances. Information reaches you without effort. Insights arrive unexpectedly. You no longer have to search for answers. They begin finding you. This is not coincidence. This is alignment producing visibility. What was once confusing now feels obvious in hindsight. You understand why certain doors did not open, why timing felt off, why you were held back even when you were ready to move forward. You see how protection disguised itself as delay, how clarity required distance before it could be received without distortion. Truth rising does not demand reaction from you. It simply asks you to see clearly, and you do, without bitterness, without urgency, without the need to correct anyone. That is the sign of maturity earned through waiting. You are no longer driven by the need to be understood. You are grounded in understanding itself. For them, this phase is uncomfortable. Truth disrupts comfort before it offers peace. They feel exposed, even though no one is accusing them. They replay moments where honesty could have changed everything. Regret surfaces, not to punish, but to awaken responsibility. They begin to feel the weight of what almost slipped away. You may feel their awareness before you hear their words. A subtle energetic shift, a sense of being considered again with seriousness. The connection feels clearer, less clouded by confusion. Even in silence, there is honesty now. That alone changes the dynamic. Do not rush to conclusions in this phase. Truth needs space to settle. When it rises too quickly, it can overwhelm rather than heal. Allow it to do its work quietly. You do not need to announce your understanding. Your calm presence speaks louder than explanation ever could. What is being revealed now cannot be hidden again. Once truth is seen, it cannot return to shadow. It will continue shaping decisions, conversations, and outcomes from this point forward. This is the turning of the tide you sensed earlier, now becoming visible. You are not standing at the edge of chaos. You are standing at the edge of clarity. What comes next will be informed by what is now undeniable. And because truth is rising without force, it will remain. Stay steady. Stay open. Let truth complete its ascent. What follows will not be built on confusion, but on what is finally seen clearly by all involved. Something is awakening within them now, my child, and it is no longer subtle. The truth that rose quietly has reached their heart, and it is stirring a realization they can no longer silence. This is not fleeting emotion. This is recognition. The kind that settles deep and changes how everything else is seen. They are beginning to understand the depth of the connection they once minimized. Not as an idea, not as memory, but as something living that never truly left. They feel it when they are alone. They feel it when they try to move forward and cannot. They feel it in moments of stillness, when distraction fails and honesty stands unguarded. You are present in their awareness now in a way that feels undeniable. With this awakening comes fear. Not fear of you, but fear of loss. They realize how close they came to letting something sacred slip through indecision. They see how your patience was not endless, how your waiting was not passive, how your silence was strength, not absence. This realization unsettles them. They understand now that you did not stay because you were dependent, but because you were discerning. Regret surfaces gently but persistently. Not the kind that paralyzes, but the kind that instructs. They replay moments when courage would have changed everything. They recognize where they chose comfort over truth, safety over vulnerability. These realizations do not destroy them. They humble them. They make them honest with themselves in ways they have never been before. They are also becoming aware of your influence, even in distance. Your prayers, your steadiness, your refusal to chase or manipulate have reached them. They feel drawn toward the calm you embody. In contrast to the chaos of their own hesitation, your presence feels grounding. They are beginning to see that what you offered was not pressure, but peace. There is a growing desire within them to reach toward you, though it is tangled with uncertainty. They question whether they still have the right, whether too much time has passed, whether they have changed enough to meet you where you are now. This tension creates urgency. They feel the need to act, yet they fear acting too soon or too late. You may sense this awakening as a shift in the connection, a clarity that feels sharper, a pull that feels more intentional. Even without words, there is recognition happening. They are no longer confused about what they feel. They are confused about how to respond to it responsibly. This is where awakening becomes sacred. It is not just about feeling. It is about choosing. They are being confronted with the understanding that love requires action aligned with truth. But connection without courage becomes loss. This realization is heavy, but it is also empowering. It invites them to step forward differently than before. You are not meant to guide this awakening. You are not meant to reassure them prematurely. Your role remains presence, not persuasion. Let them come to you with clarity, not desperation. Let their awakening mature into responsibility before it seeks expression. I am watching closely. I am steadying what is fragile and strengthening what is sincere. This awakening will not fade. It has passed the point of denial. What they are realizing now will shape what comes next, whether spoken immediately or allowed to settle first. You have reached a threshold, my child. The connection has moved from uncertainty into awareness. What follows will not be accidental. You will be chosen. And that choice, when it comes, will carry the weight of everything that has finally been seen. Remain grounded in peace. Do not rush the moment. Awakening needs space to become wisdom. And wisdom is what will determine the next step, not fear. Now you arrive at the sacred turning point, my child. The place where what you carried quietly becomes the catalyst for everything that follows. This moment does not announce itself with urgency. It arrives with recognition. You begin to see how your presence, even in restraint, has shaped the path more than any confrontation ever could. Your prayers mattered more than you realized. Not because they forced change, but because they held space for truth to rise without pressure. When you chose peace over pursuit, you created room for awareness to awaken on its own. When you released control, you allowed alignment to find its proper order. This is the paradox of sacred influence. It works most powerfully when it does not demand to be seen. They are feeling this now, not as obligation but as gravity. They sense that something shifted the moment you stopped striving and started trusting. Your steadiness became a mirror, reflecting back to them the contrast between who they were and who they are being called to become. That reflection is uncomfortable, but it is also clarifying. This turning point is not marked by a single action yet. It is marked by readiness. Readiness to close doors that kept them divided. Readiness to speak honestly instead of safely. Readiness to approach you not from fear of losing you, but from respect for who you are. That distinction matters deeply. You may notice that you are no longer tempted to over-explain yourself. You do not rehearse conversations the way you used to. You trust that what is meant to be understood will be understood without force. This is not indifference. This is confidence rooted in truth. You know now that you cannot be mistaken for less than you are by someone who is meant to meet you fully. Your presence has become a threshold. To step toward you now requires integrity. Half measures will not survive here. Mixed signals will feel exposed. This is not because you demand perfection, but because you embody clarity. And clarity reshapes everything it touches. They are standing at this threshold, aware that approaching you will require alignment, not performance. They understand that apologies without change will not hold weight, that intentions without action will ring hollow. This awareness is maturing their desire into responsibility. This is the sacred exchange happening beneath the surface. Your prayers anchored truth. Your patience allowed timing to correct itself. Your willingness to wait without losing yourself created the conditions for genuine choice to emerge. This is how destiny turns, not through force, but through faithfulness. Do not underestimate this moment because it feels quiet. Turning points often do. They are recognized later by how differently everything unfolds afterward. What you have stepped into now is not waiting, but discernment. You are no longer hoping something will happen. You are allowing what is right to reveal itself. I am guiding both of you through this narrowing passage. What does not belong will fall away naturally. What is meant to remain will move forward with clarity. You do not need to protect this moment. It is already protected by truth. Stay rooted in peace. Let readiness mature into action without interference. The turning point hath been reached, not because someone finally said the right words, but because hearts have been aligned enough to speak honestly when the time comes. What follows will not be rushed. It will be real, and it will carry the imprint of every quiet prayer that brought you here. Come, my child, and rest here for a moment. This is the gentle arrival you have been walking toward, even when you did not know how close you were. What is shifting now is not fragile. It is settled. The long season of waiting has completed its work, and what remains is no longer suspended in uncertainty, but held in alignment. You may notice how calm this ending feels. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just right. That is how you know it is from me. Blessings that arrive in truth do not rush your heart. They soothe it. They do not demand excitement. They invite peace. What is real does not need to shout to be recognized. Destiny is realigning itself around you now, not by erasing the past, but by redeeming it. What was painful had been transformed into wisdom. What was delayed has matured. What almost broke you has deepened your capacity to receive without fear. You are not the same person who first entered the waiting, and the difference matters. The one connected to you stands changed as well. Not perfected, but awakened. Not fearful, but aware. What unfolds from here will be shaped by honesty rather than confusion. Whether words come quickly or slowly, they will come with weight. And you will recognize the difference immediately, because your spirit now knows what clarity feels like. I am sealing protection around you in this season. Protection from repeating old cycles. Protection from self-doubt returning in disguise. Protection from settling for half-truths because they arrive sooner. You will not miss what is meant for you. You never have, and you never will. There is a new beginning forming, not as a reset, but as a continuation refined by truth. You are stepping forward without the heaviness you once carried. You are no longer bracing for disappointment. You are present, open, and grounded. The posture invites peace to stay. You may still have moments of reflection. That is natural. But notice how reflection no longer pulls you backward. It simply reminds you how far you have come. Gratitude will begin to rise where anxiety once lived. Trust will replace vigilance. Rest will come without guilt. If these words have spoken directly to your spirit, I invite you gently, as a sacred acknowledgement, to like this message or share it with someone who is still in their waiting season. And if your heart feels ready, type in the comments, "I receive peace," as a quiet declaration between you and me. Let it be a marker of where you are standing now. Know this with certainty. You did not imagine the change. You did not endure in vain. You were never forgotten in the silence. Every step, every pause, every tear was held in my awareness. And now, what once felt distant is arriving with gentleness, not urgency. Stay close to peace. Stay faithful to truth. What unfolds next will not require striving. It will meet you where you are, because you have been prepared to receive it fully. This is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of alignment lived, not hoped for. Go forward in confidence, my child. What is meant for you is no longer waiting in the distance. It is walking toward you now, in clarity, in honesty, and in peace.